Hello, and welcome back to this special series from Karger Publishers and the POLG Foundation. I'm Will Mountford. In our first episode, we explored how mitochondrial disease works, how the buildup of damaged DNA inside mitochondria drains the very energy from a person's cells. When there's not enough energy for muscles and organs to do their job, they begin to wear down and shut down. Tragically, the earlier this process starts, the more devastating the impact. However, this isn't always a childhood disease. This is a story of Jeff, an adult living with POLG who fights a silent battle every day. His journey to diagnosis began on a day that should have been about celebration, the day before his birthday, while he was simply buying groceries.
So I was out grocery shopping, and I get a phone call from a young lady named Caitlin. She was a geneticist at IU, and she said, "We found it. You have mitochondrial disease. You have POLG mutation." And my response was, "Well, who are you? And what the hell is that?" And because I had never heard of that, so she made an appointment. I came in and I saw her and my neurologist, Dr. Pascuzzi, and they gave me a bunch of information on it. And it's very strange when you're told that you have a rare disease, because at least for me, I can only speak for me, but it's like when you're on that quest and you know something's wrong and people tell you something's wrong and you get all these different diagnoses. When you eventually get the diagnosis, you want it to be something that you're familiar with or something you can explain. If somebody would ask me 10 minutes for that phone call, like, "Hey, for $1 million, tell us everything you know about mitochondrial cells," and I would walk away as poor as I was when they asked the question. I knew nothing. Uh, and then basically you learn that the powerhouse of the cells is where the energy, and they're in almost every organ and everything like that. So it makes sense that they can affect, and it affects different people different ways, and it can affect any organ. And you and I both may have 10 of people in the room may have the exact same mutation, but have 10 different variations of it. And I may be fine, they may be fine with one thing, and I may be on the vision, and my vision's off that day. So so that's frustrating. So when you actually do meet people, it's like, that's another little caveat. Where you meet people, you want people to mimic what you have. When you have something, you want people to be able to say, "Oh, I got that too," and mimic it back to you, if that makes any sense. And they, most of the time, they can't. The same thing with Parkinson's or MS. It's all everybody's variant. But it's frustrating when you can't meet somebody and go, and you can talk shop with them, and they're experiencing the same thing you are. You feel like you are alone, and it's just you that had, like, they can might as well name this disease Jeff, for all practical purposes. It's like, "Hey, what do you got?" "I got Jeff." You know, it's not good. You don't want Jeff. you know. So my life has changed to where my balance is off, my vision has changed, the fatigue is crushing. Uh, so I have to force myself to stay up on my feet and moving, because if I sit down, I'm done.
Was your health on your mind all that much before this began to unfold?
I was fine, if you ask me, up until about 2018, when I had that stroke like event, or stroke or relapse, whatever you want to call it, where those symptoms really just said, "Hello, we've been here all, for a long time. We just want to say hello and introduce ourselves." And from that moment on, I don't know if I made that clear earlier, but from that moment on, those never went away. I have not stopped dealing with the balance issues, with the vision issues that happened that night. And from that moment on, it's been a constant thing that I've dealt with. My life has never been the same since then. And then I had another event in 2021 where it just escalated everything through the roof. And then they kind of settled back down, but they weren't to the level they were previously. So my concern was not more so, "Hey, oh my God, I got this disease and this, that, and the other." It was like two part. There was one was like, "Well, why didn't I notice this before? Can't anybody catch it before? And why all of a sudden at my age did it all of a sudden, if it's responsible for all this, start doing it at that age?"
With your experience being so individual in a very small pool of other distinctly individual experiences, What part does a POLG patient or advocate community play in your life now?
I have not really found a whole lot of people like me, adult, whatever. Uh, what I'm meeting is a lot of parents of infants and adolescents. And let's make one thing straight, and I think we all agree with this, and I don't want to meet anybody that doesn't. The focus for the research and the studies and the trials needs to be on the infants and then the adolescents and then on up the lines of somebody like me. I'm the last. But the thing about it is I'm the one that has the voice compared to an infant. I'm the one that has the most life experience. And I'm the one that probably has the most wherewithal to say, let's do this trial, let's get this trial. Whereas an infant doesn't have that opportunity. An adolescent that's in school, or like Prince Frederick, they're just dealing with their issues. And so I think it's going to take somebody like me to lead the charge and say, I can do these things. I can do the trials. I can do the studies. Bring them on. Somebody probe me. Somebody prick me. Somebody do something. Because if they can learn from me that it can help an infant or an adolescent, let alone me, fantastic. This isn't the end for me. I still got time to do things. But there are the children, the infants, the adolescent, where time is much more precious and time is much more urgent. And I just think that we have to have urgency on my end to do what we can to help them. We're just so spread out, and there's so few of us. We're all across the world, but somehow, some way now with this technology, there's got to be a way of uniting us as a group and say here, and let us come together as a group and build it from there. And then I think people will come to us.
Well, let's use your voice, as you say, for those that can't share theirs, to get the message out there. Is there anything that you'd like to get through to doctors or health professionals in particular?
If you have a mito patient, learn, learn. If you don't want to learn, then let the patient know, and then do professional courtesy and say, "Hey, I don't want to learn. I don't want to take the time because you're the only patient I'm ever going to have with this." And I've had that have told me that you're the only patient I've ever had. We're going to have with this, so it's really not worth my time and effort to do it. Well, as a patient, though, it makes me feel like I don't matter. And it's a horrible place to be when you have a medical condition and the person you're supposed to go to says, "I don't care." It's like, what? How can you say that? How can you legally say that? But anyway, so if you're a doctor, and learn. And if you don't want to learn, do professional courtesy and find that person that person can go to that does know more about it than you. But if you don't teach or educate people on these things, or say, hey, we're going to spend a day or two on each one of these diseases. But if you ever come to a point where in your profession that you come across this, here are the links and here everything, here's where to go to keep updated. So I think there needs to be an educational, like in America there's NCBI or whatever. I think they need to be able to go, and there'll be a library or a place where doctors can go and say, okay, I just got a patient come in, it's got POLG. What the hell is it? What I do? But right now, the hope is that basically we're on off label. If something is found for for POLG, it's because another drug was for something else. And well, we found that it helps with fatigue. Like I take modafinil, it's off label for the fatigue. But the way medicine and doctrine is structured now, it doesn't make it conducive to get a diagnosis for a rare disease, especially for rare disease that affects multiple organs or multiple systems, and you have multiple symptoms. If I'm making any sense, so you it is very frustrating. You almost have to leave it to yourself. And what happens is a lot of times, like people ask, like, when do you become a hypochondriac? And I'm like, because I have like 6 different diagnoses. And I'm like, I'm not a hypochondriac. If I was a hypochondriac, I'd be in heaven. I have a different diagnosis for every day of the week. And what hit me was one day I sat there and I got so frustrated. And I go, what if all these people aren't wrong? What if they're all right? and they're just seeing what they see when they saw it in their own little world.
And what would you like to change either about people or the world to make tomorrow, whatever tomorrow looks like, be that little bit better for you and for other patients?
If I had a choice and you put me in charge of Mito for a day, POLG for a day, I would say first thing we got to do is educate people, educate the world of what this is, who it affects, how it affects them. We need to get people involved and people to step up so we can get people to do studies and trials and then explain all that. And then I'm frustrated on twofold. I'm frustrated with the mito community, the POLG community, but I don't know how many out there because I just don't feel like we're stepping up. But I think maybe just be part because we're so spread out, we're disconnected that way. But I also feel frustration with the research and the pharmaceutical companies. But also, I get it. Hey, man, if it costs $1 billion or whatever, or a couple $100 million to get, a drug trial started, and there's only 30 people, and you need 50 to do a drug trial. I mean, it's just common sense. So it comes down when you talk about money. Right now, there's not enough of us to be profitable for the pharmaceutical companies, and people don't want to talk about that. But it's the truth, and it makes sense because if I was Lilly's, why would I want to invest $1 billion or a couple $100 million for a drug to put out on the market that only a couple hundred people are going to use, and I'm never ever going to see that return on the investment. But through genetic testing, and then if there's enough of that, and then I think we're going to see the other things. We're going to see the research. We're going to see the trials. We're going to see. So then we're going to see the medicine. What do you call it when they go through the trial? Trying to get to the market. As far as organizations like the POLG Foundation, keep doing what you're doing. Keep the awareness up. Keep pressure on and giving incentives to the researchers and giving them reason to keep invested in looking into this. Giving them a reason to want to look at POLG as opposed to, cat scratch, coochie magoo fever, or scurvy or whatever. Something else. Yeah. Give them a reason to be in our playground. Give them a reason to come to our house and help us. UMDF for the POLG Foundation, Mito Canada, uh, Mito Australia, to kind of pull together resources and say, let's do a campaign to educate the world on what this is. I really believe that people, the more they're aware of that, and the more the public's aware of it, the more help we're going to get.
Thanks again to Jeff for speaking with us. For more about POLG and the POLG Foundation, head to the episode description accompanying this episode for links, material, and support. If you've not already seen it, go back and watch our first episode, speaking with researchers about the molecular underpinnings of his symptoms, and then head to our next episode, speaking with clinicians working on treatments, perhaps someday cures for mitochondrial disease. See you then.